Thursday in Parliament, I think we witnessed a watershed moment in our history. The government of Guyana abandoned all pretense on accountability and transparency and resorted to what is commonly characteristic of this government, bluster. Today, I do not want us, because the news cycle is overloaded in the recent time, and I do not want us to miss the significance of what took place in the National Assembly last Thursday. As you're aware, there have been many charges in the past by the then opposition, APNU, that the People's Progressive Party and its members and the government that it headed was corrupt. It was an entire plank, almost the major plank, the primary plank on which it ran its campaign for the 2015 elections. It promised an accountable government. It promised commissions of inquiry, promised investigations, and it promised total transparency in the conduct of its affairs. One would have thought that the opportunity presented last Thursday by the People's Progressive Party when it tabled a motion to make public for the past 10 years the tax declarations of members of Parliament, that this accountable, transparent government would grab at such an opportunity, will embrace it, and will, as the motion called for, urgently table legislation to give effect to that measure. At the beginning of the presentations on the other side, after the motion was tabled and spoken to by Bishop Edgill from our side, I had the impression that the government would have supported the motion, because I heard a presentation from the Prime Minister saying that the motion is deficient in that it leaves out one person, the Bharrat Jagdeo, given that former presidents or presidents in office since the time of Forbes Burnham do not have to pay taxes, and they did not have to make declarations to the GRA. Therefore, Bharrat Jagdeo will be exempt. And that is why this motion was brought forward, because it gave Bharrat Jagdeo a loophole. And that what would have been the preferable thing was to have not just this motion, the tax declarations made public, but also the submissions to the Integrity Commission made public too. And that would not exempt Bharrat Jagdeo. So having heard that and some other presentations of a similar nature, we decided in the People's Progressive Party to amend our motion, which had called only for the tax declarations of the past 10 years to be made public. We amended the motion to include declarations to the Integrity Commission for the past 10 years, too. And we further amended the motion to urge the government to take urgent legal criminal action against those who have not complied with the act. Now, we thought the government would embrace this, given the huge talk about throwing people in jail and accountability and everything else. And given that the Prime Minister had urged this declaration of our statements to the Integrity Commission. To our surprise, but it is not surprising to the nation, I think, they voted against it. And the reasons given, I'll go through those in a moment. The reasons given can only be described as laughable. The first reason is that people across Guyana, all Guyanese citizens, are liable to pay taxes only for the past 7 years. So beyond 7 years, the GRA does not have the enforcement capability to go after you. That was reason one. Now, how could this had nothing to do with what we were calling for? One would have assumed if you were submitting your declarations to GRA, you would have had available 10 years, the 10 past years of submission. All that we were asking is that the law be amended to have MPs place themselves to demand of themselves a higher standard, so that they, not all the citizens of Guyana, but they will comply with the new law which says members of parliament will make public their declaration. This happens in many other countries in the world, especially for those who aspire to office and who hold critical position. And you would agree with me that the legislators of this country, they are an important group of people, and they should hold themselves to a higher standard, but they have not. So that was the first reason given. Then the second reason given was that we do not really need this at this time. So apart from it being illegal, we do not need this at this time, because Minister Trotman has a motion that will amend our motion, the motion that was finally passed, amending our motion, calling on members of the National Assembly to submit their taxes to the GRA, to pay their taxes, and to submit their statements to the Integrity Commission from somewhere in mid-2016. Now, this is purely nonsensical. You don't need to call on members of the National Assembly to pay their taxes. That's required, first of all, by our laws. And secondly, the law about Integrity Commission, the requirement with huge penalties that for non-submission, has been in place since 2000. So here is it that the APNU legislators are saying that the people of this country must comply with laws on the book, but they will choose when they want to comply with laws relating to integrity. That is, they will start in June 2016. Forget that the law has been on our books and been complied with by many of our members since the year 2000. The year 2000. Then we had the pantomime and the comedy of the Prime Minister waving his bank book in the Parliament and saying, look how many bank books I have, as though that will prove a point. How do we know that what's in the bank book has been declared to the GRA and to the Integrity Commission? It was all for optics and the show. as he's so prone to, or so inclined to do often. And then he said to me, and the Speaker asked whether that took place in Parliament, and he said to me, I've paid $500,000 in taxes. So this is our Prime Minister. And the reason why this is so important, and I'm repeating it today, is because when they took the 50% salary increase for themselves, one of the primary arguments, in fact, the main argument made by the President of Guyana at that time, is that these people who are now in the cabinet were accustomed to large salaries in the past, and therefore they had to give this big increase to maintain their lifestyles. That was the implication, that they had to give them because they are moving from private sector now to the public sector, and they wanted good people. Now, if you pay 500,000 Guyana dollars per year in taxes, our tax is about 30%. So you're earning just over $1.5 million a year. That is what Nagamutu implied when he said to me he paid $500,000 in taxes, that he was earning just over $1.5 million per year. I know differently because in some years in the Berbice Bridge, he had, I think, $6 million earnings for the work he did there. And the arbitration at GNIC, I think another $6 or $7 million for the work there. I'm not sure. But effectively, he's saying, if you take 1.5 or 6 million and divide it by 12, that he was working for $130,000 a month before he got into the prime ministership. That salary has moved from $130,000 a month to $1.7 million per month. Effectively 13 times more than he declared to the GRA, 13 times more. When you look at the other benefits, and I quickly looked at, conservatively put it, at just over $3 million, because even the staff alone, their salaries would be probably over $2 million, the people who attend to him. And if you look at the combined cost of carrying him, that's over another 27 times the declaration to the GRA. So over 27 times in terms of benefits, and over 13 times in terms of salary. The Prime Minister today enjoys over 40 times more than he declared to the GRA as his annual income in the past. 40 times more. And he likes to go on about pension. That's why I mentioned to the Speaker, I said, he always says about Jagdeo's pension. Apart from the fact that that pension is 7/8 of the salary of the president. So when the president's salary goes up, that pension moves up too. But that pension, the same principle was used to calculate Otto Chung's pension, Janet Jagan's pension, Desmond Hoyt's pension, and the same principle is being used to calculate the pension of Samuel Hines and Donald Ramatar, all presidents. It's not a special arrangement. But this is after, if he has such a, and he speaks about obsession, he has such an obsession about the pension. Well, the Prime Minister, if he were to retire tomorrow on $1.7 million in gross salary per month, he will get 7/8 of that as his pension, probably even bigger than mine. probably even bigger than mine. And this is retroactive to June of 2015, after he'd been in office for just 1 month, or just about 6 weeks. He was never head of state, never head of government, never had the responsibility of running this country. Has a portfolio that is a diminished one. He has a desk at the office of the president, and his pension, when he retires, will be bigger than mine, Nagamutu. And we talk about pension. But this is the typical thing. So let's come back to the motion. This government, having voted against a motion, because if you say the PPP is corrupt, one would think you would want the nation to see their declarations for the past 10 years to the GRA and their wealth that they have accumulated and their declarations to the Integrity Commission for the past 10 years, and the entire country would have seen it. And that's one. So then if there was anything there, the nation could have judged the People's Progressive Party. The nation could have judged it. But I guess they do not want that, because many of them want a new baseline to be established. They want to say when they must start complying with these acts. And I don't want to speculate too much, but I have my suspicions as to why. But I know that many of them are worried because non-submission, and they have not submitted for many years their statements, carry jail term too. And that many of them could be charged either by the state or privately, by private criminal action. And it's easy to prove for submission. It's either you submitted or you didn't submit. And many of them have not complied with the act for 10 years, the law. And that has a jail term. So when we talk about who should go to jail, maybe we should start looking a little bit broader now. But they have lost every moral authority as of that day to ever talk about corruption in the PPP again. They've lost all the moral authority, the high ground that they had, this image of being the promoters of transparency and accountability. So that's one. The second thing that has been extremely worrying to me over the past few days has been this whole saga of the Commissioner General of GRA and his firing. We heard that he was sent on leave to effect a probe. Then we saw the chairman of the board saying that there were some reasons why they should fire him. And then we saw a response from the Commissioner General. Now, this Commissioner General has been there for many years. As far as I'm aware, he has discharged his responsibilities in a professional manner. You've never heard about any opposition member in the many years under the PPP, or it's a rare thing to hear about an opposition member complaining about being targeted for their taxes or anything of that sort. So the discharge, in my view, of his responsibilities have been very professional. We have heard the Commissioner General say in his statement that one, I was asked to rehire people who are corrupt or who have been fired for corruption. Has the media corps in Guyana asked the Minister of Finance or the chairman of the board of GRA or the acting Commissioner General who, if they have rehired anyone who was fired in the past, and has the media corps investigated where any of those people have been fired for corruption? I am aware of a few people who were recommended to be terminated by the Auditor General who have since returned to GRA. But our media corps seems not to have any interest in that. And here is this pure government, the transparent government, getting away with what I think is murder. And it's easy to verify whether the Commissioner General is telling the truth. It's easy. Ask the people involved, and then you can ask him. He said, I have been asked to settle tax matters that will cost billions of dollars. Now, it's clear the Commissioner General has the sole authority to settle tax matters. The Minister of Finance, the Ministry of the Presidency, none of them can tell him how to settle a tax matter. Yet here is the Commissioner saying, I have been prevailed upon, I've been urged to settle tax matters, and I have the list of people that where I was asked about this, to settle their matters. Have we followed up on this? Is the media not interested in potential billions of dollars of revenue lost? For what reason? Isn't this interference? Isn't this contrary to good governance, interference in the tax authorities of our country? He has spoken about the photocopying of files and said, I have details of this, including the files of a minister. I've been asked to promote people who are not qualified. He is not compliant. I think these things, when there are these charges by a technical officer, a professional person, not by the politician, not by the minister, because they have a political motive, then not just the media corps, but the international community must have a look into this matter. And I do hope that this happens, because this is ominous for the future of Guyana. It's an ominous thing if the tax authorities of our country can't manage in a professional manner. That is something that is extremely worrying. And I do hope, too, that the international community, including those who have solicited to help to draft laws, the World Bank, because we plan to talk to them soon, the World Bank and the UNDP, would see the track record of this government as it relates to transparency when they examined the vote in the parliament last Thursday, and that they will not be part of a witch hunt against the PPP. Those are two things that I wanted to talk about. I also wanted to talk about sugar and and the many positions, the confusing positions around sugar. Because the government has gone into overdrive in its propaganda campaign to justify the closure of the Wales estate. So let us start by what the government itself has said about the closure of Wales. We have had many statements, and you can trace those on the campaign, where they said sugar estates will not close, that they will not close the factories or any part of sugar. They've said that clearly. They made a pledge to support sugar on the campaign trail. They made a pledge to pay the workers a 20% increase in wages and salaries. All of that was part of the campaign. And every person in Guyana knows this to be a fact. We also know it to be a fact that they said, we cannot take any action on sugar. We're in a holding mode until the Commission of Inquiry has completed its work. A holding mode to determine whether we can pay wages and salaries, whether we will pay wages and salaries, a holding mode as to the future of the industry. That was a fact too, and now everyone knows this. So it was, as you know, not recommended. Last week we dealt with that extensively. The Commission of Inquiry debated sugar and the closure of any factory, and they concluded, 8 of the 10 members concluded that there should be no closure. So what have we heard since? Now, recently, Gau and Nasi were invited to go to a discussion with Gaisuko on the Wales estate closure. This was after the public announcement was made, 2 or 3 days after the announcement was made. When they showed up, they didn't even have the courtesy of sending the chief executive officer or the chairman of the board to meet with the unions. They sent some staff from the human resources, one board member who said he is somewhere around human resources issues, and the staff of the industrial relation department to meet with them. This is a callous way that you treat the 2 unions, not even the CEO or the chairman of the board to talk to them. So they were told there that the decision was made by the board recently. That was, the management told them that the decision was made by the board. Note this carefully. The Minister of Agriculture had said that this decision was part of Gaisuko's budget and part of its action plan for 2015. For 2015. And therefore it was made before the COI, the Commission of Inquiry. Well, if this was true, they had planned to close Wales, and what the minister said was true, that it's part of the action plan, there are 2 questions we must ask ourselves. Why is it up to 3 weeks ago they were tilling the land at Wales for planting cane? If this was part of the action plan for 2015 and made before the COI, why were they tilling land there to plant? And why did they rehabilitate the drainage system? Why did they fix the cokers? So that's one. So that points to that basically, if that was true, then there's a lot of incompetence. And secondly, if they knew this was so, that they were the part of the action plan to close Wales, and that was made before the COI, 2 of the members of Gaisuko, the chairman of the board, Mr. Clive Thomas, and Errol Hanuman, who is the CEO acting, are members of the Commission of the Inquiry. Why did they not tell the Commission of Inquiry, we have taken a decision to close whales and have the COI, the members of the COI, debate this issue for several hours, and 8 of its members said, we don't support closure. They debated the issue whether this was so. Why did they not tell them that the government had already? So clearly something is wrong here. Something is wrong. And the government is in a big mode. I heard a PR recovery mode. I heard the decision was made one evening, and a telephone call was made to Nagamoto. He was on his pleasure trip in New York, and he agreed to it on his pleasure trip when he was overseas. And that is how it came out so precipitously, so suddenly, so contrary to all that was told to us about the COI report being debated in Parliament, etc. The decision was made in a small circle. And so this tells a story of itself. No matter what they do. Now the president has said the recommendations of the COI is not cast in, is not gospel. Then why did you have a COI in the first place? And why did you tell us you're waiting the COI to decide what to do? Why did you waste $70-odd million of our money, to the taxpayers' money, to do the commission of inquiry? And should we even pay any attention to anything else in the COI? Any of the other recommendations or any of the numbers, because they're not gospel too. It is just a bad decision. And so the government has now been peddling several things. Government and its surrogates and the Ministry of Propaganda. The one is that the PPP closed LBI and Diamond. So that's one thing. 2, we spent all the money on Skeldon, and therefore there was no money remaining for Wales. And 3, we are duplicitous because we did not support the bauxite industry. This country did not support bauxite the same way it supports sugar. So let us examine those 3 issues. What took place at Diamond? First of all, the diamond factory was closed in 1985. The cultivation remained open, and we were moving cane from Diamond using the waterways from 85 to take them to LBI sometimes and more, using the waterway. By 2010, we had also Houston Estate on the East Bank producing and employing people. By 2010, Houston Estate had gone out of production. They had diversified into cattle rearing. And you had about 300 workers working in the cane cultivation in Diamond. We set up a committee that was chaired by Mr. Ragurai, who was a board member and an agriculture specialist in Gaisuko many years. He headed an estate. Gau and Nasi were part of this committee. I'm telling you this because it's a difference in approach. They visited many of the locations. They look at the field data. They had a debate, etc. It was found that moving the cane from so far caused some of the cane content, the sugar content in the cane, to have problems. There were 300 workers at that time. So we offered the workers alternative employment elsewhere. The workers said, many of them said, they preferred to be severed because the collective bargaining agreement, I think it was that said that if you have to go beyond 10 miles from where they were working, that they could ask for severance. They didn't want to be transferred. That was the key argument. I went to meet the workers. I recall meeting the workers together. I'm telling you this because it's about approaches. We didn't just issue a statement out of the blue. We included the unions in the initial process, and then we listened to the workers. The workers said, we should be severed. If you want to rehire us, we will go back and seek employment anew, but we want our severance first. Because if we go there and we lose our jobs, then we will not get the severance. So we had a huge meeting several times, and the workers, using that principle, said, beyond 10 miles, we don't have to move. And we then severed the workers. Gaisuco did not have the money, so the government gave them the $385 million for that, the 300 workers. Many of those workers then were rehired at Wales and LBI, but now starting afresh because they had received their money already. What did we do? In the meantime, the community along the East Bank, our plan was to diversify and expand employment opportunities on the East Bank. Housing schemes, banks, factories, a whole range of things. If you go to Diamond today or the East Bank, you will see the alternatives that we provided in those communities. We have generated thousands more jobs. Not the 300 jobs, and these were not lost because the people went to different estates, some of them were rehired, etc. But the alternative to the community there was massive expansion and development along the East Bank corridor. So that is vital too, because you will see that this government is not offering any alternative to people over there. So that is what happened in relation to LBI, to Diamond. Now, LBI, we started off with an engagement. First of all, LBI was running at half capacity. I think it was 85 weeks of 156 grinding weeks they had per year, both of them, LBI and Enmore, the two factories. So they were both at half capacity. We expanded the land cultivation in Enmore, so more canes were grown at Enmore, expanded the fields there. And secondly, the packaging plant was opened or under construction at Enmore. So we needed more sugar to go into the packaging plant. The two factories were running at half capacity. And so there were about 250 factory workers in LBI at that time. We decided the canes were always moving because they're contiguous estates and they're minimal amount of private cane, unlike Kurt Canal, minimal amount of private cane, contiguous estates. So what happened is the fields were left open at LBI because they're contiguous. We expanded. And we said the factory we should close the factory. But since they're close by, all the workers, there was a committee set up again with Gau and Nasi, and every single worker was interviewed. and made an offer. They were offered to go to work at Enmore. They then, many of them, took up the offer to go and work at Enmore. Those who did not remained at LBI because they expanded the workshop there. And so I think 4 jobs were lost. 4 jobs were lost in LBI because of the closure of LBI. 4 jobs were lost because people went to work at Enmore in the factory, some of the factory workers, and some stayed in the workshop at LBI. But the key thing was we interviewed every single worker. Now that is our experience with these 2 matters. So I've heard a lot of talk about how, oh, they have no moral authority. We do have moral authority. We approach workers with respect. We included their unions long before, not after the fact. They are part of the process. So that is very important. Now, how has this country treated bauxite? Now you see that it was only the last maybe 6 years or so that sugar needed the subsidy from the state. Sugar had been a net contributor to the budget for a very long period, net contributor to the budget. So a few years, the last few years, and particularly, as we said before, because the European Union price was cut. But what will be, how did we treat bauxite, this country? Because the same people who were saying that sugar demands too much from our budget now and we can't sustain it, they acted very differently when it was the bauxite industry. So if you look at our Minister of Foreign Affairs, he had given an affidavit to when we had the arbitration proceedings with Green Mining Company, because the government had issued in June 1992, I think $29 million of bonds to Green Mining, and they had gone to they had claimed that it was expropriation, and we were in arbitration because of that. So this was done prior to us getting into office. So we defended the case, and he gave a statement there. The $30 million that we assumed in debts in the Treasury at that time, $30 million, that is equivalent, if we look at today's, leaving out the interest we pay, which is another $18 million. If we look at that money invested, the future value of that money spent in 1992, what it would be worth today, you discount it by 8%, you use 8% interest rate rather, it would be about $170 million in today's terms. But if you look at paragraph 12 of his affidavit, he said that between 1982 to 1990, the government of Guyana injected $220 million into the bauxite company. Now, $220 million in the 80s, if you again use a compound interest rate of 8%, say return, that is equivalent in today's term of $1.5 billion. It's equivalent to $1.5 billion of assistance. At that time, our gross domestic product in 1990, even the $30 million of debt that was assumed by the government, our gross domestic product was less than $300 million. It was about 10% of our GDP. Just the assumption of green mining debt, forget the 220 million US we put in. The $30 million is equivalent to 10% of our gross domestic product. We can take the entire long-term debt of Gaisuco off the book. And we went through that last week. I showed how some of the debt, the government benefited from it, not Gaisuco. We can take the entire long-term debt of Gaisuco's book, and it will not be equivalent to 10% of gross domestic product. I know maybe these numbers, maybe at some other point, I'm hoping that the Prime Minister doesn't get his hands on these numbers, because with him, they can be magical. They can turn into magic. As he said, the production at Skeldon in their hands became magical, their defunct factory. So I just want to establish that at some point in time, we gave the bauxite industry a huge share of our economy in a long period to keep it alive. Secondly, in the past 10 years alone, we have put in electricity subsidy in the bauxite industry, $25 billion. Electricity subsidy for the communities in the last 10 years. And we are quibbling about helping Gaisuco. 10 years alone, the past 10 years, $25 billion. I'm not even calculating the full period, because this has always been but 10 years. And when we got into office, they're talking about privatization. There was a World Bank project to privatize Lin Mine, the bauxite company. And there was an Australian company called Minproc that had won the contract to prepare the company for privatization. You would see the assistance we gave throughout that period. We found that the World Bank project there. We found the World Bank project there. To privatize the industry. And when it was eventually privatized, I have some pictures now. I led a team from the Ministry of Finance. We spent several days in the community from Kwakwani to Linden prior to this. We did an area development plan, which is comprehensive, how we're going to diversify the industry. We applied for and got an EU grant of 12 million euros, which is under the program, the Linden Economic Advancement Project, that had loan components, making small loans to small businesses, an incubator for business, spinning off some of the activities that Lin Mine had into small businesses, infrastructure like into West Watuka to open up more lands for agriculture purposes. All of those things were part of our economic diversification plan that we did before the privatization. We also came back and we put in the budget. That was the only region that had a special tax incentive, that if you were to invest in Region 10, you will get tax write-offs beyond what you could get by investing in other parts of the country. This is how we approached it, in a very humane manner, talking to people on the street side, in the markets, working in Victory Valley and Wisman, all these places on projects. I remember because I did, this was personal, many of us, the staff of finance, etc. We didn't spring it on people. We opened a call center there. That call center that we opened that was shut down under this government, 80-something persons lost their jobs. 80-something persons lost their job. Was part of our diversification activities too. So that is one. And then when the Berbice River, I remember Arima Mining Company, when Alcoa decided to walk away, the company was 50-50 and was managed by them. We took back the company. The government didn't shut it down. We said too many people's lives depend on this. So we brought what was essentially a company off our books. We brought it back into the fold of the government because we were concerned about workers there when Alcoa decided to walk away. And I recall at that time the PNC and Mr. Lincoln Lewis and the others who have been writing, saying to the people, don't merge Bormine with AMC. That because we had black gold in the ground, the bauxite. And when the people decided to walk away, they went quiet. And we took it back and worked with it. And then 2 years about or so, 2002 I think it was, when Bormine lost its contract and the workers requested the merger, I went on the ground personally in Everton with the workers, and we sat together and worked to save the industry, and then we got Rusal to invest over $100 million, and thousands of jobs have been saved because of how we approached that. Very, very different, and all of them went quiet, the PNC and Lincoln Lewis and the unions, when the workers requested. In fact, the workers chased some of them away because they were saying, no, don't merge, that this is black gold. And so I'm telling you all of this to say we have approached these issues in a humane way. We have always worked with people, not spring things on them. The last point, so those were three. Two issues about how we treated bauxite and diamond and LBI. The third one is about Skeldon itself. We have seen the numbers from the COI. Let me tell you, we have had, under the Sugar Sector Support Program from the EU, 111 million euros disbursed to Guyana. If there wasn't any sugar, there wouldn't have been that. We used a substantial part of that, and it was very pleasing to hear one of the former commissioner, the head of the European Union delegation said, we moved from project support to budget support because only in mature countries that have strong financial systems do we move to budget support. That was under the EU. They moved to budget support. We use a lot of that money, the 111 million euros. That's billions of dollars, close to 30-something billion dollars, Guyana dollars, to support poverty-related activities. In a net sense, if we had given all of that to the sugar industry and we had taken out the loan that is on Gaisuko book for the power purchase plant, the power generating plant where they supply electricity for the national grid, you will have probably seen different dynamics in the numbers. So all of this is a red herring. We supported Skeldon. Skeldon is working, and it had some problems. It is important for the future of the industry, and we can support, keep whales too. We can do it. And it will be a fraction of the cost that we have spent in other parts of in the bauxite industry and many other sectors, and that we continue to spend in the bauxite industry, in the mining communities, a small fraction of it. And by the way, we have saved over 200 million US dollars in lower fuel prices. From 2014 to 2015, our budget for the cost of importing fuel has gone down by over 200 million US dollars, over 40 billion Guyana dollars we have saved. And had we not had that saving, you probably see the exchange rate tanking by now. But that's a huge saving there to the country. 200 million US dollars this country has saved because of lower fuel costs. So we believe that you can support these activities, you can support the keeping whales open, particularly in a period when there's little employment, low economic activities, and it's not taking place because of what's happening in the global economic environment, but because of economic incompetence. There's been no study to look at diversification of activities in Wales. In fact, when they told when the Gao and Nasi went to see Gaisuko, they were told, we plan to rehire some workers. They asked, how many? We don't know as yet. Then they said they plan to do some diversification. They asked what? They don't know as yet. Who will do it, Gaisuko or private people? They don't know. So they're toying with the lives of people in West Demerara, the cane farmers, the sugar workers, the communities around Wales. They're toying with the lives of people there. I know it's hot in here, so I don't want to maybe go on too much more because there are a few things that I wanted to talk. I wanted to talk about budget, but maybe I can end there and let you ask the questions, and maybe then I can come back a bit to the budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now take your questions.
Mr. Regarding the Prime Minister's taxes, and it suggests that he is at fault, according to your arithmetic. But,
no, I didn't say he's at fault.
well,
Yeah.
but you suggest that when you say that, you actually suggest he's paying less taxes than he should.
No. Anyhow, go on. Yeah, go ask the question.
But
I did. That was not what I did.
You did not. You said with certainty that other members of Parliament are at fault in the same manner.
Is that the question?
Yeah, you
Okay.
said that.
Okay.
Well, that suggests that it gives credence to the idea that you have had complete information on the taxes of parliamentarians. Did you or did you not receive any information from GRA regarding the taxes of government?
Yeah. If you check my budget presentation, not the budget, in Parliament, I have never on a single occasion mentioned the specific information of any member of Parliament. What I'm suggesting is that maybe they have things to hide. That is why they voted against making public the declaration. That if the president of our country says that they were earning these large sums as private citizens, then we have a duty, or they have a duty to prove, and they can prove this in this way, that they actually were earning large sums of money, and therefore the justification was a valid one. So that is what I said. The only one that I mentioned, specific, is the Prime Minister. And he told me that. That's why I said to the Speaker, Mr. Speaker, he just mentioned to me. So if you check my entire presentation, it has nothing to do with the specifics of anyone. Now, I do know, on the other hand, that to the Integrity Commission, that there have been many non-submissions, because as president, the Integrity Commission, they have the law says that they should give you a report about non-submissions, not details of people's submission, but who has submitted and who has not. So I do know that there have been many non-submissions contrary to the law. This is why twice we have gone to Parliament with motions urging members of Parliament in the past to make their submissions. That is why we went to Parliament urging them. So I do know that, but I don't know any specifics about people's tax income. The only one that I used was the Prime Minister because he told me this. So that was the issue. I don't. Categorically. No. Categorically, I do not. And if you check my presentation carefully and you find anything there, I'm prepared to apologize to you and to the nation if that is so. I never implied that I knew anything.
Regarding Wales as state.
No, let me move on. And yes, sure. Yeah.
Next question. Yes.
Mr. Jagdeo, don't you feel that Mr. Sattar has some level of responsibility to discuss, and he said in his last statement that he would be disclosing the names of persons and some other situations that he had to do. Instead of putting the responsibility on the government and on the media, doesn't Mr. Sattar have first the responsibility, since he's the one making the claims, to showcase those issues and put them in the public sphere?
Yeah, sure. I saw a very interesting situation in Trinidad and Tobago, where the governor of the central bank was fired for disclosing specifics as to who purchased foreign currency. So I think it is illegal to disclose specifics. It's not illegal to if you have had pressure. So, but I think, first of all, you need to get a baseline. You need to ask the chairman of the board. It's a simple question. Was there anyone rehired who had been terminated in the past? If so, who? All right? That's a simple question. The chairman of the board. And then also ask Mr. Sattar too. You should ask him to deal with the specifics, with the facts. But it's a very worrying thing.
I see another hand.
Yes, Mr. Jagdeo, to what extent are you concerned, or have you taken into consideration that should government go out to the workers at Wales, reach out to them and try to convince them that the closure of the estate is a good thing, that this can backfire on your party at the upcoming local government elections?
This is a free country. I don't think that the PPP has bound the, or the hands and feet of the government and put a barricade on the approaching Wales for them to go into the community and talk to people. I believe that they should go. I believe they should go. But to say they're not going, somehow it would affect our support. That is not leading to, that is just hiding from the real issues. They should go and tell people why they have disregarded their own Commission of Inquiry report when they assembled this team of specialists and paid them $72 million or more to put together this report and then disregard it. And they should explain some of the inconsistencies. I don't want to go back to those issues. Why can't they go? It's not like the PPP is holding back anyone or anything like that.
Should they convince them that closure is a good thing? I'm asking whether you're not concerned that this will backfire on the PPP and the local government.
Listen, people are free in this country to make up their minds. They can listen to arguments. We underestimate ordinary people. So I'm not worried about support for local government. I'm worried about the cane farmers who employ hundreds of people, who have been supplying $800 million of cane to the factory in 2014, who will, and now it would be impossible for them to transport their cane to IFLOT because they don't have a waterway. The cane will deteriorate, the cost of production will go up. Secondly, I'm worried about the 1,700 odd persons who are working in Wales, because when GAU asked them, how many people would be rehired, etc., they don't have specifics. I'm worried about the loss of income, $1.8 billion of income that these workers earn directly at Wales, leaving out the cane farmers, the impact on the community. I'm worried about the school children and the people who sell in the markets there, and those who have shops in the area, the housewives, etc. These are the entire community. That's what I'm worried about. If they do well, I think PPP can fight its politics, not in the gutter all the time. We'll go and convince people that we can do a better job than APNU, but not at the extent of bringing misery to them, to want to cause them further misery. So definitely, if the government can come up with some miraculous or solution to satisfy all of those needs, or maintain the community. Since Nagamutu likes to work magic, he talked about magic. He thinks this is like PR propaganda. These people's lives. Then the government, by all means, should be going out to meet the workers, but with answers too, not to just go. And I heard there was an outreach.
Will the Wales sugar estate crisis be used as a political campaign element in the upcoming local government elections by your party?
A lot of these issues are constituency based. Constituency based. So there is a group of people in that area, AP, who will be, I'm sure that they'll be raising it on the campaign trail in Wales. How much relevance it would have for, say, an Essecubo NDC, I'm not sure, but definitely in that area, the concerns of people will be major, and of course the other sugar areas too, because they're watching how the government has treated, Wales. And so there are a great deal of unease, not just at Wales, but across the sugar belt, about the callous nature of the government and its departure from commitments that it made, and the repudiation of its own report, and about the way the heavy-handed way it has gone about addressing this issue.
All right, let's take another one before we get followed up, Dennis.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Sir, Handel Duncan, HGP Nightly News. I remember at your last press conference, you did talking about lending, not in that direct regard to your words, but about lending help to the government in terms of finding a solution to what's happening at Wales. Would the opposition approach the government saying, well, look, make that approach, make that first step, since this involves people's livelihood and so forth? Would you make that first step?
I saw Mr. Harman, who is in the office of the president, and I think he's in charge of the office of the president. So I said to him in Parliament that this approach will cause a lot of hardships to people. And he said, I saw your statements, and then we should arrange a meeting. So that was what I did. I talked to him in Parliament about it, and he said they should arrange a meeting. Definitely, we will be part of engaging the government if they're genuinely interested. That is my concern. If it's not for show, if it's not for optics, like the Economic Services Committee of Parliament is meeting today, and suddenly there's a rush to discuss the COI report. But how valuable is that discussion now that they have already, are they coming back to the table with an open mind, Or are they saying, we have decided on this matter, this is come hell or high water, we're going ahead with this? That is very important for me to know, too, before I engage in any discussion, because I'm not wasting our time sitting down and providing a fig leaf for the government.
All right. Yes?
My question is, what is your response to the government who would have revealed or announced that Scaling was actually overpriced?
Yeah, but I don't know about reveal. How do you reveal in a tender? A public tender went out. There were two bidders. The Booker T team, and at that time, Errol Hanuman was part of the Booker T team. They were part of the evaluation of the bids. The bids were not evaluated by the cabinet. They were evaluated by a team comprising members of the Booker T group. They made the recommendations to the cabinet. How do you, in a competitive environment, determine that it's overpriced? We talk about the punt dumper. The punt dumper, Booker T was the project manager for the Skeldon factory. We seem to have Mr. Hanuman, until now, I think, at that time he was a member of the Booker T team. Although he was CEO, he was a member of the Booker T team. They were the project managers. They, I think, designed the punt dumper. The punt dumper didn't come from China, it came from the US. We've had one of the biggest problems with the punt dumper. We chose the best. The Booker T was considered to be the best in the industry. The previous government brought them back. That's why we hired them to oversee the Skeldon factory. We didn't pick up a member of the cabinet to say, you will be the project manager. Or a member, Eve Maganis. We hired an international group to oversee the project. And they were part of the evaluation of the bid. But this government, in the true Nagamutu style, reveals things every week. It reveals.
Next question. We give for first timers, and then we can go to repeat.
Maybe if we could move away from sugar for a little bit. There was a report only yesterday about the elections in Haiti and revelations that the U.S. was involved in some sort of fraud. The U.S. observers that were in Haiti. We're coming up to local government elections. Given concerns expressed at the general elections, are we at all concerned about what we're hearing from Haiti and the U.S.'s involvement there?
I don't know. I don't know about these reports, and I don't want to blame any country. My view about the 2015 elections is that, and I've stated this many times before, is that some of the diplomatic observers, and I'm not sure that even their countries know about this, some of the diplomatic observers violated the United Nations protocol on observing elections when they declared the elections as free and fair. On the Wednesday after the elections, long before the declaration, the verification activity at the regional level, the declaration at the regional level, the request for recount, and the final declaration. The counting process and the declaration process are part of they're part of the election process. And so when they did that, they violated a significant, important principle. Very, very important principle. That is my view. And we have to examine in the future the role of all observers, that they must all subscribe to the United Nations protocol. And I remember in Sri Lanka we were told over and over, you're not here to fix things. You're here to pronounce on the results. We saw serious attempts to fix things here. So I don't want to comment about Haiti and that too much because this is now the subject of a court petition. And so we'll deal with that at some point in time.
Good.
Yes, go ahead.
The request that was made by the PVP to the Commissioner of Information for the names of the persons they have not submitted. Any word on where we are with that?
Yes, we got a response from the Commissioner of Information. He suggested that we seek this information, first of all, from the agencies, write them directly. And then if there is no, we do not get any, the information, the requested information, then we can resort to his office.
All right.
I want to bring you back, Sugar, actually. I just want to know what your take, I guess, is the level of the PPP's responsibility in relation to Wales. And I mean, the strategic plan from 2013 to 2017 was filled with a lot of inaccuracies, so you couldn't actually get a direct idea of what was actually happening based on the figures that just were never going to happen. None of the estates were ever going to be able to produce the level of sugar that was quoted in that strategic plan. So coming off of that, you have these ideas now about transferring the debt into equity for Gaisuko, but why didn't you implement some of these ideas when you had the opportunity?
But that is a pure judgment call, because how do you know they could not achieve those levels?
Because they weren't getting those figures going in, and then they weren't from 2013.
Exactly. It depended heavily on the amount of investment that the government was prepared to make to get up to those numbers. The increase in production from 2013 to 2014 was higher than from 2014 to 2015. I think they had already started an upward trajectory, and a lot of it depended on the capital input, the working capital and the capital input. And this is why we said, if we win the elections, we were prepared to put in the money because we believe that if you get up to those production levels that I believe are realistic, if you get up there, then the unit cost comes down. You start producing with the same amount of workers. You're producing twice as much sugar and with the same fixed cost too. So it was essential that we get the production up. Increased productivity is vital. And that's why last week when I spoke, I showed that in 1990, with 16,000 employees, we produced just over half more than what we are producing in 2015. Just about half, with the same 16,000 workers, to show productivity has grown. It's key. That's key. But it is about these things. But the reality is that we have had issues. If you're saying that we didn't choose the right management, okay, that the people to head, the two persons that the government has now were there throughout the entire decline in the production. They were there from the beginning of the decline up to almost 2013. That's one. So then the reality of the price cut has not been factored in. So a lot of things could happen, but we had to deal with these issues. One thing you would have not found the PPP doing is closing Wales. That is categorical.
But you would have had to have already constitute into the development of that 2013 to 2017 strategic plan. You would have already had to know that in 2017 that you was going to change its directive. You would have already seen the decline in sugar prices on the world market. You are coming with ideas now that you're not in government, that you could have simply started the implementation while you have the opportunity to do so.
But you have absolutely very little familiarity with the evolution of these plans. If you look at how many plans were produced in the past, you will see that every 2 years the strategic plans are done. It's like a strategic outlook and the annual budget. And so you have to keep adjusting these things to the reality of the present. They keep adjusting. It's not cast in stone. The strategic plan that was presented in 2014 to the members of the National Assembly, of course, if you assess it today, it will be different because you have to adjust to what took place between then and now. But the debts were clear. The long-term debts were not accumulated recently. The $60 billion of long-term debt were always in the book. They knew that. So to say now that, oh, we've just found the industry with all of this debt, they were part of loans that were taken since maybe 10 years ago. So they were part of the strategic plan that they saw. They spent 2 days in the Economic Services Committee going through those figures to claim that suddenly they know. Now, do we have problems with these industries? Yes, we do have problems. It's all, tons of problems. But the reality is that they go beyond profitability. And that's what I'm trying to get over, the profitability. What about the people in the surrounding areas? What about the people in the surrounding areas? Why, if we are thinking only profitability, why did we not close Linden immediately when it went into decline? And we inputted 1.5, the equivalent of $1.5 billion US dollars in today's term in that period. Why don't we stop this? If we're so concerned about budget expenditure, why don't we stop community support for these areas? We never did stop them in the PPP. In the last 10 years, PPP has been in office, and we spent $25 billion in supporting that community because it mattered. People matter. And that's one thing that PPP has no apology for making people matter. We're not callous, etc. Even if we had to adjust wheels, it wouldn't have been done this way. Not people hearing it from the airwaves.
All right, is there...
Did the party lobby, did your members of parliament that are on the Economic Services Committee, did you lobby to have the Economic Services Committee open to the public and open to the media? Because I understand that it's closed.
Is it closed? I didn't...
Yes.
I didn't
Well,
even realize
I don't
that.
know. I'm a member of the committee. We have never lobbied for closing it to the media.
We will support,
open.
I'm in favor of Parliament doing its work in the open. If any committees in Parliament are closed, I would support opening up any to the public. I am in favor of opening up all the committees in Parliament to members of the public. We should also, like how C-SPAN does it, we should also stream those. Not just the main on meetings on when we meet at the full assembly, but we should stream those. I'm in favor of that. In fact, we should look at it if we can put a motion. Maybe we should put
But I think the standing orders provide for the media to be present. Only on special circumstances they would meet in private.
Oh, really? But we should not even have those special circumstances because the economic affairs of this country are people's business too. I don't have a problem with it being debated in the public.
Mr. Jagdeo, if we can get...
Yeah. If we have anyone else before, and then we come back to you.
Any other new issues?
Then we can.
But we take this last one.
If we can have a quick...
You were with the new issue. You didn't ask the question yet. Let's get yours.
Ariana Gordon, Gannett, Mr. Jagdeo, your budget expectations.
Good.
All right. Okay. Let me go through. I'm sure you saw. Sure you saw this letter that we wrote the Minister of Finance on the 26th of November 2015. I had asked the General Secretary to make it public. And so we said for us to prepare for the presentation of the budget or the consultation, we would like to receive the following documents. We wanted the Commission of Inquiry report on Gaisuko at that time, November 26. We want the 5 years public sector investment program because it's a rolling program. We wanted the latest Bank of Guyana report, the stats bulletin. We would like to see the submissions by the 10 administrative regions. We wanted the IMF Article 4 consultation report. That's the latest one. And we wanted to get an actual income expenditure revenue statement for the period up to 20 November, when the letter went on, the actual and the forecast for the rest of the year. We also asked the government, since it has been a year, almost a year in office, that we'd like to receive copies of its sector strategies for rice, sugar, ICT, mining, tourism, health, education, housing, crime, and the forestry sector. We wanted to get their take on how they're approaching these issues, because we've always had sector strategies in these areas. We also said we would like to discuss with him, those were background information that we requested. The 9-point plan that was submitted by the MP who speaks for agriculture on our behalf, Mr. Siraj. I had asked him to write the Minister of Agriculture proposing a 9-point plan that could save the industry, we believe. We wanted to discuss the reduction of the corporate tax rate, the Public Procurement Commission, the reduction of VAT that they had promised. We wanted the reinstatement of water and electricity subsidy for old age pensioners, the reinstatement of grant, a substantial increase in old age pension. We wanted to discuss a reduction on royalty rates, lease fee for mining, etc., apart from some other issues. These were part of our agenda item. So we have not received anything from the Minister of Finance. When you go, but this is a serious matter. A budget is about looking at the dynamics, the global dynamics, the national situation, and trying to ensure that you use what is happening globally in your best interest and to mitigate against negative trends at a global level to ensure continued growth, prosperity, etc. So it was hard, it's hard without these things it was hard to participate in a formal meeting with the Minister of Finance. It doesn't make sense because a budget is about numbers. You have to know what the fiscal room is so that we can then suggest various things. So from what we have heard, that one, the minister may talk about electricity. Let me make it clear. Let me tell you some of the expectations. We don't want the reduction in electricity rates and fuel rates to be part of a budget measure. That cannot be a budget measure. That's ongoing. So the huge savings that the country has seen, the $200 million that we have saved between 2014 and 2015 as a country by importing cheaper fuel, we want to see the benefits passed on in an ongoing way, not to wait at a once-in-a-year event around the budget. Because if that becomes the reality, then when there are needs for adjustments downwards, people would start expecting that that should only happen at budget time. Let me tell you what this has done. The non-reduction of the price at the pump has led to a huge windfall for the oil companies, including the private oil companies, at the expense of ordinary citizens of this country. They have raked in billions of dollars in profits. The oil companies. The mere fact that we have not adjusted the prices at the pump, although the acquisition cost is lower. We always use guile to ensure that the market would follow guile by lowering the price, and so bringing the benefits to large masses of people rather than just the oil companies. So I would urge you to look this year at the profitability of the oil companies, and you will see the massive amounts of money that is there. The electricity prices should have tumbled by now, significantly, because when your oil is now $20-something a barrel, and it was $115 a barrel in the past, then really, and oil is the biggest component of cost for generating electricity, then the prices should have come down significantly. What we are doing, we are filling the coffers of GPL and the consumers of this country, the people, ordinary people, as well as the businesses, they have no stimulus. This could have been a big stimulus for the economy, because if you allow more money to go into people's pockets, they tend to have more disposable income. They would spend more, because they, especially at the lower levels, their propensity to consume and to spend is higher than at the level of the oil companies. And so that would have happened. And secondly, if we had allowed the prices to be adjusted, both electricity and fuel prices, we would have given a big stimulus to our business community, those who use fuel, the miners, the manufacturers, etc. But we have not. We talk about stimulus, but we have missed a huge opportunity because we're looking at just raking in revenue and helping out a few companies, big companies, oil companies. That's the first point. But we do not want it to be a budget measure, because this should be an ongoing adjustment. It should have been announced in the past. It could be announced in a budget day, but it should not be considered a once a year type of thing, because oil prices move up and down throughout the year, and we must have flexibility. We've seen the proposed, I think, reduction in vehicle taxes, and we support any reduction in taxes if that's an election promise. But will it increase the demand for new vehicles? Would there be a switching because of the elasticity, price elasticity? It's yet to be seen. And so could it lead to lower revenue overall because there's no increased demand for new vehicles because of affordability? A poor person still can't, many of them still may not be able to get the acquisition cost of a new vehicle. Forget the taxes, but the cost of acquisition will probably be higher. And so we hope that it would also, if we're thinking about helping ordinary people, that maybe there will be some reduction in taxes on reconditioned vehicle too, so that another class of people could benefit, another ordinary people could benefit. We're hoping strongly that there will be, given what has happened, that there was a one-off $50,000 grant at the end of the year to public servants. That has not become part of their salary base. And given that the increase they got was only retroactive to July last year, that there should be a substantial increase in wages and salaries to to offset that, because the 50,000 has not become part of the base. They just got it as a grant, and it's now become added to their gross salary. So you have to have a huge salary increase to compensate for that. And the same thing with the pensioners. We've calculated that the pensioners are worse off last year after the budget than they were, because for many of them, not all of them, because many along the coast, etc., the cost of the water subsidy and the electricity subsidy was greater than what they got an increase in their pension. So a pension increase of a minimum, I think, of about 35% will probably get them back to a position, minimum increase, to where they would be comparable to the past, where they wouldn't have lost benefits, a minimum increase in that. So we're expecting a substantial increase there too. We expect that there will be significant support for the productive sectors of our economy. That measures would be announced on mining sector to help the mining sector. Measures will be announced to help the rice industry. Measures will be announced to help sugar, the other sectors, and all the other sectors of the economy, agriculture, services, etc. These are some of the things that we hope. The government, we will support the government to reduce the taxes, because that could be another stimulus, and that's what we need in a time of hardship. So any taxes that the government will reduce, we will support them on, but especially the value-added tax, which was part of their campaign. They said they needed a bit more time. They said they'll do it early. Well, in the campaign, they said they will do it. Then last year's budget, they said they would needed some time to study it. And now we are hoping that they have made a decision, and we will see the value-added tax coming from 16% down to 12%. This is very important. It's part of their election promise, and so we will support them for this. And then, of course, the reinstatement, even if they don't want to increase the Because We Care cash grant to 20,000 and more. But even if they should put back the 10,000 in the budget, because the few measures, the couple vehicles that are given, and by the way, we're submitting a statement. I think, did I speak about this last week? We're submitting a statement, a question to the Parliament to ask the following things. These donations we see made by private individuals, are they personal donations to the president, because I see his name on these buses? If they're personal statements, would they form part of personal donations? Would they form part of his declaration to the Integrity Commission? Or are they donations to the government of Guyana? If they're donations to the government of Guyana, will they be recorded in the register, the government register of assets? We would also like to see who have donated what. So the names of the individual, how much they have donated, and whether any of these individuals have any contract or supply the government. Because we want to guard against conflict of interest. Having said all of these, even if we do this voluntary kind of thing with businessmen's goodwill to help people, the children move around freely from school to school, and that's a laudable initiative. It's a laudable initiative. But should it not have, how can you take a few businessmen, get a few boats and bicycles and buses and put them around the country, and then take away $1.67 billion from the families that they had to help them with transportation. Is it not hypocritical? Is it not just a show? It's a political initiative. Because here you had an opportunity to, in a more sustained way, put your money where your mouth is. And now all you're replacing a cash grant for transportation for every school child that costs the Treasury $1.6 billion to a few buses and boats that has the president's name on them. That is, we want the restoration of the cash grant, because then we can say that this is a serious matter. There are lots of things more, because the global situation, I've heard excuses being made about what's happening around the globe, lower demand in China, the quantitative easing will end, and therefore it will have an impact on interest rates globally, which could cause problems for emerging market economies, the weak global demand for commodity prices. I've heard all of the reasons. But we had a worse economic crisis in 2008, 2009, the worst since the Great Depression. And Guyana grew through all of that. Guyana grew through all of it at a healthy pace, at a healthy clip. So definitely global factors will have an impact. But it also calls for sensible policies to adjust. And we're looking, let's see if the budget will come up with those. Let us see if the budget will come up with the policies that we need to put in place now to ensure that we mitigate against this impact. I've pointed out already that they cannot use Trinidad and Suriname, those countries, as examples. We have saved $200 million, $40 billion from low oil import. This is a lucky government. I would be happy to be running the economy at this time. Lucky government, $200 million of windfall. And that should be translated into greater economic activities, more job creation, etc. They're squandering it.
All right, last question, then we close.
Let them go on.
Mr. Judge, apart from this windfall that you're referring to, you repeatedly said that the economy is doing so badly. Where will the money come from to pay higher wages, higher pensions, without fueling inflation, if you're talking about the economy is doing so badly?
Because when a country starts a downward slide, you have to do a number of things to try to check this slide. So this is why what you do, not to make it pro-cyclical, but anti-cyclical, that is to go against the cycle, and if the cycle is downwards. You can do two things. You can increase your spending at a government level if private sector demand is weak. So as I pointed out a couple of times before, the equation for GDP is consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net exports. So government spending goes up to offset lower private consumption. You can do that, or you can lower taxes, so you reduce disposable income. What happens is that you will probably have a larger fiscal deficit in that period. But is that larger fiscal deficit inflationary? Is it inflationary? And this is why the things that we ask for, the forecast, the macro framework, etc., is absent. You don't have that. So that the monitor, and then, so you have to. Now, our inflation rate is low. It could be. It may not be. In this time of depressed demand and falling global prices, there is a downward trend on inflation, because inflation, you can import inflation through higher, fuel prices, but our fuel prices have fallen. Commodity prices have come down too. So there's a downward pressure, inflationary pressure. So I don't think an increase in the fiscal deficit now would result in major inflationary trend, but it could be countercyclical. And that is what we are arguing for. So, but I don't see any debate on this issue. You know, and then you can look at areas of unproductive expenses. Gulsaran said, and I'm hoping that in this year's budget, and many of you will ask him, that $28 billion of our annual budget is stolen from public procurement. So if this is a clean government, you will expect us to save $28 billion, right? So that $28 billion that they've been talking about could go to stimulus. They could do all the things I want and have more. They can reduce VAT, they can pay the public servants the big salary increases, they can pay the old age pensioners, they can restore the grant. You know, only 1.67 billion of the 28 has to go to restoring the school program. Are we not holding these people accountable for what they've been saying? Are we not doing this? We allow them to get away with loose talk all the time. And they run our economy like it's a chicken coop.
All right.
By the way, I saw Ramjatan launching the Citizen Security Program, gave a huge speech. That the 15 million US program was negotiated under the PPP. It's a PPP program that he launched. And I hope that the Chronicle and the others will put that too. A PPP program Ramjatan launched. Okay? Thank you very much.